Hello. Um, Obviously, I'll just start off the way I usually do. Unlike my last video, I am Aaron Klein. Um, and you can actually just watch the last video if you're interested in knowing why I'm saying that, why I'm starting the video off like that. And I'm always going to, unless I ask questions around that. Um, I think I brought up something last time that makes it felt off the cuff. Like it felt like unprompted, but it's actually really important to ask. Um, how do I put this? I mean, I'll put it easy. What First of all, like what happens after you die? Why is death so sudden, and why are our lives so fragile? But at the same time, why um, why did I make that comment? Um, like what is the purpose? And actually, my first piece of wisdom that I really understood, I made the comment off the cuff to one of my cashiers, and it's actually really important I made the comment because no one actually, like, the question gets answered in a unserious way, because if you try to approach it seriously, most people run around in circles trying to find the answer, and that's okay. um, and sorry, I think I'm getting a little bit cold. That's okay. The question is, what is the purpose of life? And actually, my the answer that I finally come up with, I say finally, whatever. It Things just slowly dawn on me. One day I'm not paying attention, and then all of a sudden I have an answer for something I forgot I'd asked a long time ago. And usually they're actually really important answers now to questions that don't really matter to most people. Like they'll come up once in a while, and people just whatever, and ignore them, and that's someone else's job. Well, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is failure. Yeah, it's kind of simple, right? Just purpose of life is failure. Um, and to put that into perspective, why is it failure? Um, you're actually going to fail a lot. Yeah. So what's the purpose of death? There's an ultimate end to everything. Um, am I saying that one day the world is all going to burn up when the sun explodes in supernova? That's like yes, but like that's really unimportant. That's the wrong frame. What I'm saying is life fails. This material world was meant to end. Your life was meant to end. Because failure is intrinsic to existence. In fact, some of that is actually the point of it. We have agency so we can fail. And that's actually beautiful. um, it's not something that's actually like failure in the West is really looked down upon, especially from most Western traditions. Um, People see sin as a choice, and yes, but in the way that each of us sin, it's also the way that each of us will never know the entire truth. It's the way that um, it's the way that we'll never completely understand God. But in this one way, you have to teach your kids to learn how to handle failure and rejection, because the world already rejects them. I know I'm saying this from one of the most privileged positions in the world. I literally bring home $43,000 to $45,000 a year. In most parts of the world, like, I'm saying this now, specifically, now that war has crept right back in where it belonged. There's always war, there's always famine, there's always disease, there's always tyranny. So I'm one of the most privileged people in the world. I understand that. Um, and I'm saying this after 30 years. I'm approaching 31. The point of life is failure. And this is more like an Eastern, what is life? Who am I? Does that mean this realm is the realm of Satan? I think that the easiest way to explain that is instead to say, because logic alone always fails, and you can always try to rationalize as to why it wasn't possible to succeed, and the game is rigged, or even worse, you can rationalize why you haven't failed when you did. The choice to hide when you are insufficient is evil. Like after you've started, like, at first it's not that bad, even though you really shouldn't be hiding that from God, because He's a Father. He does care. He wants us to succeed, but He also needs us to fail so we can learn from it. The choice to hide your failures till they start, like, when you hide your failures, they tend to do damage to you, and worse so, after a while, they tend to start doing damage to other people. And you tend to start to lean on things that you didn't get properly, or even if you did get properly, you've lost the right to use them, and you start to lean on them. This is how tyrants are born. They either didn't earn, or even if they did earn, they fall from grace, quote unquote, fall from grace, and they choose to use the power that they have to hide from their failures, and hide their failures from their people until one day they catch up. I have no idea what this means. As far, like, because I don't write everything out anymore. Because sometimes it's just easier just to say it. And sometimes it just works its way out in your head while you're saying it. Or sometimes once you've said it, it echoes around in your subconscious until eventually an answer pops up. Where was I going with that? Failure. I'll restate where I was, and I'll see if I can get there.
Hey, you all going to bed early?
Sorry, my sister interrupted. The point of life, the ultimate point of life, is to fail. And I think that, yeah, no one tells you that in a Western. That's actually not even explicitly said in Eastern traditions. You know what? That actually completely puts a spin on Christianity that no one sees. You will fail, and that is the point of life. And that is beautiful. Sorry that I've been tilted. My brain just couldn't. It's whatever. So actually, my goal, when I do eventually find a wife, is to have this conversation with her and explain that mainstream Christianity has the wrong frame of reference to train our children. Because failure is what sends you to hell in a Catholic style Christianity, when instead it is the choice to reject God and to hide your failures. Hide when you've done something that you know is wrong. Hide when hide when you've failed to meet life. But on the flip side, there are things that you can, because once you understand this, you can actually start reframing life to understand some of the more important things that get you ahead, that make you a better person for your life. And the first part of that is you have to learn to forgive yourself. Once you own up to your mistakes, you pray to God, tell him your mistakes, accept guilt, forgive yourself. You have to. You will not be able to survive in this world if you can't forgive yourself for your failures. You have to teach your children that's okay to fail, and that in correcting them, you seek to have the, you know what, I'll put it this way. One of my cashiers took $400 in what looked like fake bills a couple days ago. I'm not going to say her name. I'll say it's a girl, but that's more than half my cashiers. The machine took it, so we're just going to hope and pray that it's the machine, that it's not her fault. But she felt extremely guilty, and actually society had taught her that that you should take that guilt and hold it and never forgive yourself. And I couldn't find, to me, just seeing the response on her face, I think she was looking for a consequence. So that way she could let that weight go. So that way she could feel like she bore the consequences of the guilt and not have to live with it. Because actually guilt is a very powerful control mechanism if people are abusing it. When you live in a law-oriented society. And that is sort of a good thing, but usually the people that need to be controlled with guilt, you have to give extremely harsh consequences, because the vast majority of people, the guilt is the consequence. That horrible, dreadful feeling is a very powerful drug. She learned a very valuable lesson, and I gave her a hug. That's consequence. You get a few hugs. You'll get through the night. Let's go work on some go-backs. And actually, this is going to sound really funny, where I got this idea from, of oftentimes the feeling that you get from breaking yourself by failing to do something is more powerful than any material consequence. Where I got this from is from, this is going to sound crazy, but the show 2.5 Men. I got this 15 years ago, and to me it hit something. It was really funny, but it hit. And I knew one day it would come up where I would have to use that idea of the consequence came with the action. The episode had something along the lines of, yeah, Jake had paid someone to buy beer for him and his friend, and him and his friend were puking nonstop for hours over the toilet, and Charlie Sheen's character was his method was just, oh, I think you have plenty of consequence right now. I think you're feeling it. And Jake was like, like, please, what's the punishment? And he was just like, I think you have the punishment right there. I think it came with it. And that, like, sat with me. And I liked it. Because I know that sounds, like, weird to say I liked it. But at some point, like, you have to find out who you are. And sometimes just telling the person the consequence came with the action. Or no, just don't say it and let them figure, or like you have to find the right time to say it. Let them sit with the consequences of their actions. Sometimes that's the best way to teach someone. Sometimes that's the best way to teach children. And yeah, that does mean that like once in a while, a few of them won't learn from the consequences of their actions. So like they'll go to prison or sometimes they'll get killed or whatever. But like there's already a portion that's going to do that. If that increases by 2% and the rest of the population become better people, I think that 2% increase is way more worth the remaining population understanding consequences at a deep level. And if those 2% of people die or are incarcerated later in life, that is okay. Because if you want a society to function, that small percentage of people, it's not entirely a sacrifice. Like, you can make the claim, but I think it's like an anti-sacrifice. It is, we are no longer going to help you by giving you a consequence in addition to the consequence already. You don't tell a child who's lost their friend because their parents did something that they had to move that they're the fault. Sometimes you have to explain that, hey, there are consequences for actions, and sometimes your consequences hurt people. And that feeling that you're feeling right now, that your friend is feeling worse. Their life is getting upended. Or what if that friend goes and steals and gets caught, and parents have to come get them? There's major consequences for misbehavior from the rest of the world. And we've lived in a world for so long now. Like, this is actually a really big issue. By submitting to and increasing the power of a police state, we've actually alleviated ourselves of feeling the guilt that we're supposed to. So there are people making really bad decisions. This is why it's actually really important to have fathers in the house. So that way they can start by building a correct relationship with those children. So that way they can choose when there are correct consequences. Because it is actually the goal of life to fail and to learn from it. And in fact, that is how you find most powerful artists. This is going to sound crazy, but most powerful artists either have failed horribly. No, usually their parents have failed them horribly, and then they have failed horribly, and corrected themselves, and their best way to cope is to be creative. And when they're not creative, for their own sake, they tend to go and do drugs. Yeah. So, the reason why we teach our children to respect death and loss, and to help them understand that one day they too will die, is because without that, they won't understand why it's okay to fail. And without that, sometimes guilt is too much to bear alone. Especially when we live in a society that's all about guilt. Thank you for your time.